Bonjour tout le monde, je m'appelle Johnny et bienvenue au plus étrange. In case it wasn't obvious already, our wee story today takes place in France. In April of 2011, 5 members of the Dupont De Ligonnès family were brutally murdered. In fact, the killer or killers even killed the 2 family dogs. But hold your horses, bucko, because there was a 6th member of the family that was missing. Have we got a mystery on our hands? Let's find out. The Dupont de Ligonnès family were a fairly normal, decent bunch and lived in the French city of Nantes. The father, Xavier, was a businessman and the mother, Agnes, was a schoolteacher. Together they had 4 children. Arthur was the oldest at 20, Thomas was 18, Anne was 16 and the youngest at 13 years old was Benoit. On the 12th of April in 2011, family and friends were getting worried as they hadn't seen or heard from any member of the family for quite some time. By the 19th of April, a full investigation was underway. The authorities were unable to trace any member of the family or uncover anything that would indicate where they had gone. A wanted notice was distributed across France. Media, TV, radio, you name it. They needed to get hold of this family. 2 days later though, the police would uncover something. Literally.
Police in western France have found the bodies of a mother and her 4 children buried under the terrace of their house in Nantes. They'd been missing since the beginning of April. The family's 2 pet dogs were buried alongside.
In the back garden of the family home, they would discover 5 sets of human remains, as well as the remains of the 2 golden Labradors that they kept as pets. It would come to pass that Xavier the father was not among these bodies. Pretty swiftly they carried out autopsies on the remains, and it was discovered that all 5 of them had been drugged, and as they slept, they were all shot. The weapon used was a .22 caliber long rifle. This exact weapon was the one which Xavier had inherited from his father only 3 weeks prior. It was discovered that the bodies had been covered in lime. This is believed that it was to speed up decomposition. They were then wrapped up in burlap sacks and buried under the patio in the back garden under concrete. It's gruesome for sure. It's important that we go back a wee bit and look at the timeline of events leading up to this horrific discovery and the subsequent disappearance of Xavier. Xavier Pierre Marie Dupont de Ligonnès was 50 years old at the time of his disappearance. What did he do for a living? Well, that's a good question. We could say businessman or salesman, but to be honest, no one actually knew what he did. He had created many small companies in the past, most of which no one actually knew the nature of. Most of them were a failure and went into liquidation. Internet searches say that he was involved in things like loyalty schemes for restaurants and stuff like that. One of his friends would later say that Xavier told him just prior to his disappearance that he was actually a secret agent and that his family and him were emigrating to Australia. Can't be that much of a secret agent though if you're just running around telling folk. In the lead up to the murders, Agnes's boss would receive a letter saying that she would not be returning to work as the family were moving down under. The family's bank accounts were closed and the lease on the family home was terminated. Do you remember my video on the List family murders? I think you're smelling what I'm selling here, right? Letters were also written to the kids' schools, saying the same thing, and also to the closest friends of the teenage kids, basically saying that they were all leaving and don't try to contact them. A typed message was left on the family's letterbox which said, "Return all mail to sender." The house was completely emptied also. Between late March and early April, Xavier was also visiting a shooting range on the regular. He even bought a suppressor for his rifle, obviously so that it would be silent when it was used. On the 1st of April, so 3 weeks prior to the discovery of the family under the patio, the older laddie Arthur failed to show up at his work in a pizzeria to collect his paycheck, something that he always did right on time. That same day, his father Xavier went out and bought a shovel, a few other tools, and a shitload of cement. He also went to 4 different stores and purchased a bag of lime in each, I assume this was to avert any suspicion. The family were all last seen together on Sunday the 3rd of April, eating at a restaurant. However, Arthur's absence at this meal was noted, but to this day, no one knows why. The next day, being Monday, young Anne and Benoit never showed up for school and were never heard from, despite friends trying to reach them via text message and online. They thought it was strange that they could be leaving for Australia, and yet they never mentioned anything to anyone. So investigators believe that Xavier killed the family on the night of the 3rd of April, but they believe that he killed Thomas the following day. This was because he was seen at another restaurant with Thomas having a meal around 9 p.m. Two of the waiters there would later say that the father and son barely spoke to each other the entire time, and that Thomas complained of feeling ill towards the end of the meal. It's haunting to think that at this stage, did Thomas know that his mother and siblings were dead? Maybe his dad gave him some sort of bullshit excuse before going out for dinner. Another weird thing to consider is the fact that the family were not showing up for work or events and social gatherings that they would normally have otherwise shown up for. But this was happening for a fair few days prior to the murders. So what was going on inside that house? This part is still a mystery. Bearing in mind though, that the time of the murders were determined by the autopsies, but this timeline has been disputed by other investigators, purely because members of the family were seen alive after that date. On Tuesday the 5th of April, Thomas had gotten a text from Xavier to say that he had to come back home quick as his mother was injured in a cycling accident. Later that day, several text messages were sent to Thomas's friends. However, they would all later say that the style of the text and the way that he said things, they believe that it wasn't him sending these messages. There was a witness that claimed that they saw Agnias walking the two dogs on the night of Thursday the 7th of April. Neighbours would later say that in subsequent days they would hear dogs howling. This would stop after a short time. Going by all this, it's hard to say for sure when the family were actually killed. It's believed that by Friday the 8th of April, they were certainly dead. According to evidence taken from the scene and the autopsies, it's been reported that Xavier drugged his family and then shot them as they slept. But then, it's also believed that certain family members were killed at different times, possibly even on a later date. So let's assume then that it's all true. Surely this would mean that the remaining family members were aware of the killings. Why didn't they raise the alarm? Maybe they couldn't. It's yet another one of these things that we'll most likely never know. In the following week, Xavier would travel across France checking into various hotels using false names. An unsigned typed letter was sent to Xavier's immediate family, basically saying that for the past few years he was working undercover for the American Drug Enforcement Agency, and that he and his entire family had to quickly be relocated to the United States, where they would be entered into the witness protection program. On the 14th of April, Xavier was caught on CCTV at a hotel in a wee place called Var in the south of France. The next day, his car was left abandoned there also. It was 6 days later that his family was found. Around a month later, an international arrest warrant was issued for Xavier. To this day, he's still on the run. It's believed that the reason he was so successful in eluding authorities is because back in 2003, one of these mysterious companies that he created was called NetSurf. This facilitates clients of the company to be able to transfer and withdraw money anywhere in the world anonymously. In July of 2015, a French journalist received a photograph. On the back of the photo was a handwritten message. The message simply said, "I'm still alive." The photo was an older photo of the two children, Arthur and Benoit. There were a few supposed sightings over the years. In 2016, it was believed that he had been traced and spotted in a casino in France, but when the cops descended on the place, they found nothing, and this was just another dead end. The cops also raided a monastery in the south of France in January of 2018, after he was supposedly sighted there, but again, this turned out to be nothing. Xavier's family, well, his mother and his sister, they've been pretty outspoken about their thoughts on what actually took place. And they have, well, let's just say, an interesting wee theory. So basically, what they are saying is that Xavier did not kill the family, purely because, well, he couldn't have dug out the patio by himself. Well, he obviously did. They also disputed the date of their death and the botched autopsy, saying that they don't believe even that the bodies discovered that day were that of the Dupont De Ligonnès family. They stick to the story that Xavier and the family were alive and well in witness protection in the United States. It's clear what happened. It was a well-orchestrated plan carried out by Xavier. In private emails he sent to his family, he admitted that the immigration to Australia story was a big lie. This was to cover the truth of him being a secret agent for the American DEA in France and that they were being put into witness protection. The main question I would start asking is why? What was the motive behind all this? And why would he plan all this out and then bury the bodies under the patio where they will most certainly be found? To date, authorities have received over 900 possible leads and supposed sightings of Xavier. However, the main prosecutor in the case is adamant that Xavier took his own life a while ago and that it's only a matter of time before his body is found. Personally, I think he did it all, of course, but I reckon he's still on the run. Hopefully one day soon, this awful excuse for a human will be discovered and brought to justice. Thanks for hanging out with me again today, folks. I hope you're all doing well. Remember to stay safe out there and above all else, keep smiling.